Long before we were the only humans left, the world was filled with others. In cold European caves, Neanderthals watched the same fires burn. In Siberia, Denisovans left behind only a finger bone and a genetic shadow. On distant islands, small human species survived in forests we barely understand. They are gone now, but not completely. Some of them may still live inside us, hidden in our DNA. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. If this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy, the cave is almost silent when the first fragment comes out of the ground. It is not a skull, not a complete skeleton, not the kind of discovery that announces itself with grandeur. It is a piece of bone small enough to rest in a palm, darkened by age, pressed for tens of thousands of years beneath cold sediment and mineral dust. Around it lie the remains of animals, flakes of stone, charcoal stains from old fires, and the slow confusion of deep time. To the eye, it looks almost ordinary. But in the laboratory, under careful light, it begins to disturb the old story of what it means to be human. A tooth is measured, a finger bone is sampled, a scrap of DNA is read like a message recovered from a burned library. And slowly, the outline appears there were others. For a long time, the human past is often imagined as a single road, narrow but steady, leading from primitive ancestors to modern people. That road is easy to picture, and almost completely wrong. The real past looks less like a road, and more like a braided river, splitting, rejoining, vanishing underground, and appearing again in unexpected places. Homo sapiens is not born into an empty world. Modern humans emerge into a planet already occupied by other humans, some familiar, some strange. Some known only through fragments so small they seem almost impossible to trust. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because this story does not begin with one species rising alone. It begins with a crowded darkness, where several kinds of humans breathe the same air, follow the same herds, endure the same winters, and perhaps sometimes notice one another across the edge of firelight. The evidence is scattered across continents. In Europe, thick-boned Neanderthals shelter in limestone caves, repair tools, butcher large animals, care for the injured, and survive cold landscapes that would kill the unprepared. In Siberia, in a cave overlooking the Anui River, a tiny finger bone and a few teeth reveal a population no one had clearly seen before the Denisovans. Relatives so elusive that their bodies remain almost entirely unknown, while their genetic shadow stretches across Asia and Oceania. Far to the south, on the Indonesian island of Flores, small-bodied humans hunt and make stone tools long after many other ancient human forms are gone. In the Philippines, a handful of bones from Luzon suggest another human branch, puzzling and incomplete, as if the Earth is offering only a corner of a much larger map. In Africa, where the deepest human story begins, the record suggests even more complexity, with ancient populations splitting, mixing, and disappearing before names can be confidently placed upon them. What survives in the record is never enough, and that is part of the mystery. Bone is fragile, DNA decays, coastlines drown, forest soils dissolve what deserts preserve. A human life may pass with tools made, fires lit, children raised, injuries survived, and nothing durable left behind. Even a whole population may vanish without a grave, without a village, without a single complete skeleton to say that they existed. The Earth does not keep memory evenly. It favours caves, dry valleys, cold chambers, and accidents. It hides shorelines beneath rising seas and grinds open-air camps into dust. So when scientists speak of extinct human relatives, they are often speaking from fragments: a jaw, a molar, a skull cap, a toe bone, a pattern in living DNA. The evidence remains incomplete, but the pattern is too strong to ignore. Modern humanity is surrounded by ghosts. The strangest part is that some of these ghosts are not entirely gone. Not in the simple sense. Inside many people living today are inherited traces from ancient encounters. A small percentage of Neanderthal ancestry remains in populations outside Africa. Denisovan ancestry survives in parts of Asia, and is especially notable in some indigenous populations of Oceania. These traces are not myths or symbolic memories. They are biological leftovers from meetings that happened tens of thousands of years ago, when different human groups crossed paths, lived near one another, and sometimes had children. No single explanation fully accounts for all those encounters. Some may have been brief, some may have involved small migrating groups, some may have occurred in regions now lost beneath sea or forest. The genetic evidence does not preserve the emotional texture of those meetings. It does not say whether they were violent, cautious, ordinary, or rare or intimate. It only shows that they happened. That discovery changes the shape of the human story. It means extinction is not always a clean disappearance. A group may vanish as a people, lose its last camps, its last language, its last way of shaping stone or reading animal tracks, and still leave something behind in the bodies of another population. The Neanderthal who walks through a cold valley, the Denisovan whose bones almost never fossilize, the island human who watches smoke rise above volcanic slopes. All belong to branches that do not continue as separate worlds, yet pieces of those worlds reach the present. They survive not as memory, because no one remembers them, but as inheritance. The old image of human uniqueness becomes harder to hold. Homo sapiens is extraordinary, but not because the species appears alone and untouched. Its history is marked by contact, mixture, replacement, adaptation, and accident. The rise of modern humans does not erase the others immediately. For thousands of years, the planet contains overlapping human realities. Some groups use different tools, some have different bodies, some may think in ways that are impossible to reconstruct. They endure climates that swing between warmth and ice, follow animals across shifting grasslands, retreat into refuges, expand during favourable periods, and shrink when the world turns harsh. Scholars still debate how often these groups met, how they recognised one another, and what their encounters meant. The silence of the record leaves room for caution. Yet the silence is not empty. It carries pressure. It asks how many human forms existed without being found. It asks how many discoveries still wait beneath cave floors, river terraces, and drowned continental shelves. It asks whether some fossils already sitting in museum drawers have been misunderstood because they do not fit comfortably into known categories. It asks why one human species eventually remains while the others disappear. The answer is not likely to be simple. Climate. Population size, disease, competition, mobility, technology, and chance may all play a part. The disappearance of other humans is not one event. It is a long fading, uneven across landscapes, with some branches gone early, and others lingering almost to the edge of recorded imagination. At the centre of it all is an unsettling recognition. The human face in the mirror is not the whole archive of humanity. It is the last visible page of a much older manuscript, with missing chapters and burned margins. Beneath that page are traces of neighbours, cousins, rivals, and perhaps companions who shared the Ice Age world. They are hidden not because they were unreal, but because time is ruthless and selective. The ground keeps only enough to trouble certainty, a tooth in a cave, a bone in a lab, a signal in DNA. From these small remains, the vanished crowd begins to gather again, and the story of humanity becomes stranger, older, and far less lonely than it once seemed. Long before the world belongs to one kind of human, it is a restless map of moving bodies, changing climates, and overlapping territories. The continents do not hold neat borders, They hold corridors and barriers, refuges and traps, river valleys that invite migration, mountains that slow it, deserts that expand and contract like living things, and coastlines that vanish when seas rise. Across this shifting planet, human groups spread, retreat, adapt, and sometimes disappear into regions where the record becomes thin. The story is not a procession from one ancestor to one descendant. It is a wide, uneven human landscape, filled with branches that grow at different speeds in different places, some leaving strong traces, others leaving only hints. In Africa, the deepest roots of Homo sapiens are taking shape across enormous distances and long stretches of time. The continent is not a single cradle in any simple sense. It is a vast network of environments, grassy plains, wooded savannas, wetlands, highlands, river systems, deserts, and coasts. Populations are not frozen in one place. They move when rain belts shift. They separate when dry zones widen. They reconnect when green corridors open. What survives in the record suggests that early modern humans emerged through a complex process involving many populations, not through one small group suddenly appearing in isolation. Scholars still debate the exact pattern, because the evidence remains incomplete. But the broad picture has grown more intricate with every discovery. Africa is not merely the beginning of the human story. It is a world of its own, where different human populations may have carried different bodies, tools, habits, and histories long before their descendants spread far beyond the continent. Beyond Africa, other human forms are already established. In Europe and Western Asia, Neanderthals occupy a world of cold valleys, open steppe, forested refuges, limestone caves, and animal migrations. They are not crude shadows waiting to be replaced. They are inhabitants of difficult landscapes, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of survival. Their bodies are compact and powerful, their faces broad, their bones strong, their lives physically demanding. They hunt large prey, make tools, use fire, shelter in caves and open-air sites, and carry knowledge suited to climates that can turn merciless. During warmer periods, forests spread and animals shift. During colder periods, ice advances and open grasslands dominate. Neanderthal life bends around these changes. Their world is not stable, and neither are their ranges. They expand, contract, fragment, and reconnect as climate allows. Farther east, across parts of Asia, the picture becomes harder to see. Fossils are fewer, landscapes are vast, and old categories begin to strain. There are human remains in China and elsewhere that do not always fit easily into the familiar boxes of Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Denisovan, or Homo sapiens. Some may represent local populations with long histories. Some may belong near branches already known. Some may point toward forms that are still poorly understood. No single explanation fully accounts for every fragment. Asia is not an empty stage awaiting modern humans. It is an immense and ancient human theatre, where populations survive in forests, river basins, uplands, caves, and coastal zones that are now partly lost or deeply changed. The absence of clear fossils in many regions should not be mistaken for an absence of people. For hundreds of thousands of years, these human worlds overlap in time even when they are separated by distance. Homo erectus and related populations endure in parts of Asia for astonishing lengths of time. Neanderthals become specialists of Western Eurasia. Denisovan-related groups leave a genetic signal that suggests a broad and complicated presence in Asia, even though their bones are rare. Modern humans arise in Africa and eventually begin moving beyond it in pulses, not as one simple march. Some early expansions may leave little or no lasting ancestry in later populations. Others become part of the longer story that leads toward people alive today. The timing is difficult, and scholars still debate the details. But the important point is clear: the human world is crowded before it becomes familiar. The climate keeps rearranging the stage. Glacial cycles lower sea levels, exposing land bridges and broad coastal plains. During colder periods, water locks into ice and shorelines move outward. Islands become closer to mainlands. The Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia becomes a vast lowland connecting regions that are now separated by sea. At other times, warming seas flood those passages again, isolating populations and burying evidence beneath water. Deserts also change. The Sahara, often imagined as a permanent barrier, has greener phases when lakes, rivers, grasslands, and animals spread across regions that are now dry. These windows matter. They create routes for movement, places of contact, and zones where populations may meet after long separation. Then the windows close. This changing geography means that ancient humans are often living at the edge of possibility. A valley may support a population for generations, then become too dry. A coastline may offer shellfish, fish, birds, plants, and safe travel, then disappear beneath rising water. A cave may shelter repeated occupations by different groups across tens of thousands of years, leaving layers like pages in a damaged book. One layer may hold Neanderthal tools, another may preserve traces of modern humans, another may contain something harder to classify. The Earth records these patterns unevenly, but where the record is rich, it shows movement rather than stillness. The surprising detail is how often survival depends on small margins. Ancient human populations are often not enormous. They may consist of scattered bands connected loosely across landscapes, their long-term survival vulnerable to climate swings, poor seasons, isolation, and chance. A group can lose contact with others. A local population can shrink beyond recovery. Another can absorb newcomers. Another can disappear without leaving enough remains to be named. The world is crowded in species and lineages, but not necessarily crowded in numbers. Many of these humans live in small, fragile communities, carrying traditions that may be strong within a region and invisible beyond it. Seen this way, Homo sapiens does not step onto a vacant planet. Modern humans enter an old neighborhood. Some neighbors have been there for immense stretches of time. Some are close cousins, some are more distant. Some may look familiar enough to unsettle the boundary between us and them. Their territories are not fixed kingdoms, but shifting zones of survival. Their encounters are not inevitable everywhere, but they become possible wherever climate, migration, and need bring paths together. By the time modern humans begin spreading widely across Eurasia, the world already contains memories in stone, ash, bone, and blood. It is a world of many human experiments, each shaped by place, pressure, and time, and within that crowded world, one neighbor will become the clearest face of the vanished others, not because they are the only ones who matter, but because their bones have survived well enough to look back. The clearest face among the vanished humans is not a stranger from a distant island or a genetic shadow hidden in a laboratory chart. It is the heavy-browed face found again and again in European caves, on cold slopes, beside ancient hearths, near the bones of horses, bison, deer, rhinoceros, and mammoth. The Neanderthal neighbor stands close enough to modern humans that the boundary still feels uncomfortable. They are not remote ancestors, and they are not simply failed versions of ourselves. They are another humanity, shaped beside our lineage, carrying their own long inheritance through ice, forest, hunger, and fire. Their world begins long before Homo sapiens becomes widespread in Europe. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthal populations live across Western Eurasia, from the Atlantic edges of Europe into parts of the Near East and Western Asia. Their bodies are built for strength and endurance in difficult climates. The chest is broad, The limbs are powerful, the frame is compact, and the bones carry the marks of hard physical lives. Their faces have large noses and projecting midfaces, features often discussed in relation to cold air, heavy chewing, and inherited anatomy. Scholars still debate the full meaning of these traits, because bodies do not preserve simple explanations, but the overall picture is clear enough. Neanderthals are not delicate creatures. They are people made by a demanding world. That demanding world is never one landscape for very long. During colder phases, open steppe spreads beneath pale skies. Herd animals move across broad distances. Winds carry dust. Trees retreat into refuges. During warmer intervals, forests return. Rivers shift, and prey changes. Neanderthals endure these swings not by luck alone, but through knowledge. They understand where animals pass, how stone breaks, how fire behaves, how shelters hold warmth, and how bodies survive injury. Their tools are often associated with the Mousterian tradition, especially flake tools shaped from carefully prepared cores. To an untrained eye, these stones may look plain, but their manufacture requires planning. A core must be prepared so that a useful flake can be struck in a controlled way. The tool begins in the mind before it appears in the hand. The old image of the Neanderthal as a clumsy brute has not survived the evidence. They hunt large animals at close range, an act that demands coordination, nerve, and deep environmental knowledge. Wooden spears from earlier European contexts show that ancient humans were capable of impressive woodworking, and Neanderthal-associated hunting sites suggest dangerous encounters with powerful prey. A horse, a bison, or a woolly rhinoceros is not taken casually. Even scavenging, when it happens, requires timing and skill in a world filled with competing predators. Cave lions, hyenas, wolves, bears, and other carnivores share many of the same landscapes. The Neanderthal camp is not outside nature. It is inside a contested world where every carcass, shelter, and fire matters. Their lives also carry evidence of care. Some Neanderthal skeletons show injuries that healed long before death damaged limbs. Severe arthritis, trauma, tooth loss, and other conditions that would have made survival difficult without support. It is possible to overstate the tenderness of the evidence, and the record does not allow sentimental certainty. But what survives suggests that at least some injured individuals lived long after wounds that might have reduced their ability to hunt or move easily. That implies social tolerance, help, shared food, or some combination of all three. No single skeleton can prove a full moral world. But these bones resist the idea that Neanderthals were only harsh survivors without social depth. There are also signs of behavior that seem more symbolic, though these remain debated. Pigment use, selected objects, possible ornaments, modified bird claws, and careful treatment of some dead individuals have all entered discussions of Neanderthal thought. Some claims are strong, others are uncertain. Some remain controversial because ancient deposits are complicated and interpretation can outrun evidence. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how frequently Neanderthals made symbolic objects, or whether some practices had meanings similar to those of later Homo sapiens. Yet the important point is not that Neanderthals must be made identical to modern humans. It is that they are complex enough to make simple dismissal impossible. Their caves are not merely dens, they are places returned to again and again, sometimes over vast periods. A cave may contain stone tools, bones, ash, and traces of activity layered through time. It may be occupied by humans in one period and carnivores in another. It may preserve a hearth from one winter, a butchery floor from another, and a burial or near burial whose meaning is difficult to determine. In the dimness of such places, the Neanderthal presence becomes intimate. They sit near fire, they sharpen tools, they break bones for marrow, they sleep within reach of smoke and stone. Children grow up learning the weight of seasons. Elders carry knowledge of roots, plants, animals, and hazards. Their world is not primitive in the sense of being simple. It is primitive only in the sense of being old. The closeness between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens becomes even clearer when modern humans begin entering regions where Neanderthals already live. In the Near East, both groups appear at different times in some of the same broad landscapes. In Europe, modern human expansion eventually overlaps with the final millennia of Neanderthal survival. The details are difficult to reconstruct. They may not have met everywhere. Some populations may have passed through empty zones where others had already vanished. In other places, there may have been contact, competition, avoidance, exchange, or interbreeding. The genetic evidence shows that interbreeding did occur, but it does not turn every encounter into a dramatic meeting at a cave mouth. Much of the truth is likely quieter and more scattered. A lesser-known detail makes the story even stranger. Neanderthals themselves were not one unchanging people. Across their long existence, their populations shift, shrink, split, and reconnect. Late Neanderthals appear to have lived in relatively small and sometimes isolated groups, especially as climates fluctuated and modern humans expanded. Genetic studies suggest low diversity in some late populations, a possible sign of long-term vulnerability. This does not mean they are doomed by weakness. It means their survival depends on fragile networks, a bad climatic phase, reduced prey, disease, competition, or simple demographic chance can weigh heavily on small populations. Extinction may arrive not as a single catastrophe, but as a thinning of connections until recovery becomes impossible. And yet, even their disappearance refuses to be clean. Neanderthals vanish as a distinct population roughly 40,000 years ago, though the exact timing varies by region and remains debated. But they do not vanish from the human story. Their DNA remains in many people today, a faint inheritance from ancient unions between their world and ours. Their tools remain in caves. Their bones continue to change the way scientists speak about intelligence, survival, and identity. They are the neighbor close enough to force humility. They show that another human form could endure for hundreds of millennia, understand its world, care for its injured, master stone and fire, and still disappear. Their presence makes the crowded human past visible, and their absence gives it weight. The next hidden human does not arrive with a face. There is no famous skull staring from a museum case, no complete skeleton stretched across a laboratory table, no broad brow or powerful jaw that can be drawn into a familiar portrait. The Denisovan enters the human story through almost nothing: a tiny piece of finger bone from a young girl, a few large teeth, fragments of ancient protein, and strands of DNA fragile enough to seem like they should have vanished long ago. In a cave in southern Siberia, buried among layers of occupation, ash, animal bone, and stone, scientists find a remnant so small that it could easily have been overlooked. Yet from that small remnant comes one of the most startling reversals in modern archaeology. An entire human population, once invisible to the eye, begins to appear first as a genetic signal. Denisova Cave sits in the Altai Mountains, a region where open steppe, forest, cold air, and mountain corridors have long shaped the movement of animals and people. The cave is not grand in the way ancient ruins are grand. Its importance lies in accumulation. Layer by layer, it preserves traces of different humans using the same place across immense spans of time. Neanderthals are there. Denisovans are there. Later modern humans may pass through the wider region. Carnivores also enter the cave. Sediment gathers, seasons turn, climates change, and the cave becomes less like a house than a deep archive, not written deliberately, but assembled by survival. When the small finger bone is first studied, its importance is not visible from shape alone. It belongs to a child, likely a girl, and there is too little of it to build a body around. In older archaeology, such a fragment might have remained a minor curiosity. But ancient DNA changes the rules. Genetic material extracted from the bone reveals that it does not belong neatly to a modern human, and it is not simply Neanderthal either. It comes from a sister population related to Neanderthals, sharing a distant common ancestry, yet distinct enough to be recognized as something else. The name Denisovan comes from the cave, because the people themselves left no known name, no language that can be recovered, no memory preserved in story. They are named after the place where a fragment survived. The discovery is unsettling because it shows how much could have been missed before genetic tools existed. Neanderthals had bones enough to force recognition. Denisovans almost did not. Their first clear appearance is not anatomical but molecular. They are a human group known more through code than through skeleton. The genome becomes the fossil. In the old sense, archaeology begins with what the hand can hold. In this case, the hand holds almost nothing, and the deepest evidence appears only after machines read the chemical remains of a vanished life. Their teeth add another layer. Denisovan molars from the cave are unusually large and do not look exactly like Neanderthal teeth or recent human teeth. Teeth often survive when other bones disappear, and they can carry stubborn clues about ancestry, diet, growth, and deep population history. But even here, caution remains necessary. A few teeth cannot reveal the full range of Denisovan appearance. They do not show the shape of the face, the height of the body, the posture, the skin, the eyes. The way a person moved through snow or forest. Artists can imagine, scientists can infer, but the evidence remains incomplete. The Denisovan body is still partly a blank space, outlined by fragments. Then the mystery widens beyond Siberia. Genetic traces of Denisovan ancestry appear in living people, especially in parts of Asia and Oceania. This means the Denisovans cannot have been only a tiny group hidden near one Siberian cave, unless their relatives spread far beyond what fossils currently show. Their genetic legacy suggests a wider world, perhaps with Denisovan-related populations occupying parts of Asia over long periods. The strongest signals in some present-day populations of Oceania imply ancient encounters somewhere far from the Altai, likely in regions where fossil preservation is poor or where ancient coastlines are now drowned. No single explanation fully accounts for the geography of Denisovan ancestry, but the signal is too powerful to ignore. A human group known from Siberian fragments somehow leaves descendants of its ancestry thousands of kilometers away. A jawbone from the Tibetan plateau deepens the story. Found in Baishya Karst cave, it is linked to Denisovans not through preserved DNA at first, but through ancient proteins and later supporting evidence from the site. The mandible is robust, and its setting is remarkable high altitude, thin air, cold conditions, a difficult environment where survival requires adaptation. This find suggests Denisovan-related people are not confined to one cave in Siberia. They can live on the edge of the world's highest plateau, in landscapes that challenge even later populations. One inherited genetic variant associated with high-altitude adaptation in Tibetans appears to have come from Denisovan-related ancestry. Though the story of adaptation is complex and should not be reduced to one gene alone, still, it is one of the most striking examples of an extinct human relative leaving a practical legacy in living bodies. The cave itself preserves an even more intimate surprise. One bone fragment from Denisova Cave belongs to a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan. She is not a distant descendant of mixture. She is the direct child of two different human groups. This discovery makes ancient contact suddenly personal, though still silent. It shows that Neanderthals and Denisovans not only shared broad regions over time, but sometimes met closely enough to have children. The evidence does not reveal whether such meetings were common or rare. Scholars still debate the social circumstances behind interbreeding, and genetics cannot reconstruct the emotional world of those encounters. But the bone makes one thing certain. The boundaries between human groups were real, yet not absolute. Denisovans also remind scientists that names can create a false sense of clarity. The word Denisovan may refer to a population, or several related populations, spread across large regions and long periods. Their genetic diversity may have been deep. The Denisovans who contributed ancestry to people in Oceania may not have been identical to the Denisovans of the Altai. They may have belonged to a broader network of related groups, some separated by mountains, forests, rivers, and coastlines for thousands of years. What survives in the record suggests not a single tribe in a single cave, but a shadowy branch of humanity whose full range is still hidden. That is why the Denisovan story feels so strange. It reverses the usual order of discovery. Instead of finding bones and then asking what they mean genetically, scientists find a genome and then search for the body that carried it. It is as if the past has left a fingerprint without a hand, an echo without a visible speaker. From almost nothing, another humanity steps forward, not complete, not fully understood, not ready to be placed neatly on a chart, but real enough to change the map of ancient life. The crowded human world has gained a hidden Eastern presence, and the cave in Siberia becomes a reminder that some of the most important people in prehistory may still be known only by the smallest things they left behind. From the cold chambers of Siberia, the trail bends toward a very different edge of the human world, an island of steep green hills, volcanic soil, monsoon forest, limestone caves, and coastlines shaped by deep water. Flores lies in Indonesia, east of the Great Sunda Shelf, beyond sea channels that have long separated it from mainland Asia, even when Ice Age sea levels fall. It is not a place that can be reached by simply walking across exposed land. To arrive there, some ancient humans or their ancestors must cross water, whether by accident, intention, or some combination that the evidence cannot yet fully explain. And in that isolated world, under the ceiling of a cave called Liangbua, archaeologists find remains that seem at first almost impossible. A small-bodied human, living surprisingly late, with a tiny brain, stone tools, and a presence that unsettles nearly every simple rule about human evolution. The first widely known skeleton from Liangbua is given the label LB1. It is partial, fragile, and extraordinary. The individual stands only a little over a metre tall, with a small skull, short legs, long feet, and a body that appears unlike any recent human population. The brain size is especially startling, closer in volume to much earlier hominins than to modern humans. Yet the archaeological layers around Homo floresiensis include stone tools and evidence of life in a challenging island ecosystem. For a time, the discovery provokes intense debate. Some researchers argue that these remains represent a distinct human species. Others suggest they might be modern humans affected by disease or developmental conditions. Over years of study, the distinct species interpretation becomes the stronger mainstream view, though scholars still debate details of ancestry, behavior, and how such small humans came to be there. The island itself is part of the answer. Islands are evolutionary laboratories, and they can produce strange outcomes without any need for fantasy. Large animals may shrink when food is limited and predators are few. Small animals may grow larger when ecological pressures shift. Flores once holds dwarf elephants known as stegodon, giant rats, powerful birds, reptiles, and Komodo dragons in the wider region. In such a place, body size is not simply a measure of advancement or failure. It is an adaptation to isolation, resources, and time. Homo floresiensis may represent a lineage that becomes smaller after reaching the island, perhaps descending from an earlier human form such as Homo erectus, or from an even more primitive population. No single explanation fully accounts for every anatomical detail, and the evidence remains incomplete. But island dwarfism remains one of the most compelling parts of the discussion. There is a deeper puzzle beneath the small bones. How does a human lineage reach Flores in the first place? Even during periods of lower sea level, deep water channels remain barriers in this region. Animals cross such barriers in many ways over long timescales, rafting on vegetation after storms, swimming, drifting, or being carried by rare accidents of nature. For ancient humans, the question becomes more complicated. Did they possess some simple form of water-crossing ability? Were they swept across by chance? Did earlier humans move through island Southeast Asia more boldly than once imagined? The record does not allow certainty. What survives suggests that hominins were present on Flores long before the Liangboa skeletons. Because stone tools from other parts of the island may date back hundreds of thousands of years, the makers of those older tools remain uncertain, but they imply a long and mysterious human occupation of the island. Liangboa does not preserve a lost city or a village. It preserves a cave floor, bones, stone, ash, and sediment. The people who live there are not builders of monuments. They are survivors in a volcanic island world where landscapes shift, animals migrate through forests and grasslands, and danger can come from reptiles, falling rock, hunger, injury, and eruption. They make stone tools from local materials. They likely butcher animals, exploit available food, and return to the cave across generations. Their lives are not small because their bodies are small. They belong to a hard and intelligent way of existing, one adapted to a place cut off from the larger human highways of Asia. The most surprising part is how late they may have survived. Early reports suggested very recent dates, but later research revised the chronology, placing the known skeletal remains roughly between about 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, with associated stone tools possibly continuing until around 50,000 years ago. These dates matter because they bring Homo floresiensis close to the period when Homo sapiens expands through the broader region towards Sahul, the Ice Age continent that includes Australia and New Guinea. Whether modern humans and Homo floresiensis ever meet remains uncertain. The evidence does not prove a direct encounter, but the possibility lingers because the timing is close enough to make the island feel less remote from the great movements of our own species. If they do meet, the record is silent. There are no preserved gestures, no clear signs of conflict, no unmistakable exchange. There is only the narrowing of time. Modern humans are moving through Southeast Asia. Sea levels are lower. Islands and coasts form stepping stone worlds. Flores holds its small human inhabitants. Then, after a certain point, their trace disappears. The disappearance may relate to environmental change, volcanic activity, ecological disruption, arrival of modern humans, or several forces acting together. Scholars still debate the cause, and caution is necessary because island records can be especially patchy. A small population on an island can vanish quickly in archaeological terms, leaving behind only a few bones and tools beneath cave sediment. Homo floresiensis forces a change in perspective. It shows that human evolution is not a ladder toward larger bodies and larger brains. A small brain does not mean a simple life. A small body does not mean an insignificant history. In the right environment, survival may favor different solutions. The people of Flores seem to carry an ancient experiment in being human, one shaped by isolation and endurance. They do not fit easily into older expectations, and that is why they matter. They reveal that hidden human species may persist in places that once seemed marginal, far from the main routes of empire, writing, agriculture, or even the better-known Ice Age cave worlds. The cave at Liangbua remains quiet now, but its silence is not empty. It holds the memory of a human form that lived beneath tropical rain, near volcanic stone, among animals that seem almost unreal to modern imagination, and yet belong firmly to natural history. The small bones from Flores do not weaken the human story. They widen it. They show that beside the broad-boned Neanderthal and the ghostly Denisovan, there is also an island humanity, reduced in size but not in mystery. And once that possibility is accepted, Southeast Asia begins to look less like a blank passageway and more like a maze of lost human worlds, some still waiting behind fragments of jaw, teeth, and stone. The maze of lost human worlds does not end on Flores. It stretches northward through islands, drowned shelves, monsoon forests, limestone towers, and coastlines that have been redrawn again and again by Ice Age seas. In the Philippines, on the island of Luzon, another set of fragments begins to disturb the map. The discovery is not dramatic in size. There is no complete skull, no nearly whole skeleton, no face that can be reconstructed with confidence. There are teeth, finger bones, foot bones, and a few pieces of limb, recovered from Kalau Cave in northern Luzon. They are small remains from a deep and complicated past, but they carry an implication larger than their size. Another human form may have lived in island Southeast Asia, separated from the mainland by water, surviving in a world where the ordinary rules of prehistoric migration become strangely uncertain. Kalau Cave lies in a limestone landscape shaped by water, darkness, and time. The cave opens into a region of river valleys, forests, and karst formations, where sediments can preserve traces that open-air tropical environments often destroy. Tropical archaeology is difficult because heat, humidity, acidic soils, plant growth, and water movement can erase bone quickly. A fossil that survives there is already a rare accident. A group of fossils belonging to ancient humans is rarer still. That is why the Luzon material matters so much. It suggests that the human record of Southeast Asia is not thin because the past was empty, but because the conditions for preservation are harsh. The evidence remains incomplete. Yet what survives in the record suggests that the islands held more human diversity than anyone once expected. The species name Homo luzonensis is attached to this puzzle, but the name should not create the illusion of certainty. The fossils are fragmentary. They represent a small number of individuals. They do not show the full body, the face, or the exact proportions of the people who left them. Still, their anatomy is unusual enough to resist easy classification. The teeth are small in some respects, with patterns that do not fit neatly into modern humans. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, or Homo floresiensis. Some hand and foot bones show features that seem unexpectedly primitive, recalling much older hominins in certain aspects, while other traits appear more recent. It is this mosaic that makes Luzon so difficult. The bones seem to carry different evolutionary signals at once, as if the island has preserved a lineage shaped by long separation, small populations, and local adaptation. One of the most surprising details comes from the curved finger and toe bones. In earlier hominins, curved phalanges are often associated with climbing ability, because fingers and toes that curve can be useful in grasping branches or uneven surfaces. In Homo luzonensis, some of these bones appear curved in ways that seem strange for a human living so late in prehistory. This does not mean these people are simply tree dwellers, and it does not mean they're primitive in a careless sense. Bodies preserve ancestry as well as function, and traits can persist for reasons that are not always obvious. Scholars still debate what these bones mean. They may reflect inherited anatomy from an older lineage. They may relate to movement through rugged limestone, forested environments, or climbing behavior, or they may preserve a combination of ancestry and adaptation that cannot be fully separated with the fossils currently known. The timeline deepens the mystery. The remains attributed to Homo luzonensis are dated to at least around 50,000 years ago, placing them in a period when modern humans are expanding through parts of Asia and toward the islands beyond. But evidence of hominin presence on Luzon may be much older. At the site of Kalinga, stone tools and butchered rhinoceros remains suggest that humans or human relatives are present on Luzon hundreds of thousands of years earlier. The exact relationship between those toolmakers and Homo luzonensis remains uncertain. They could belong to an ancestral population. They could represent another group entirely. The record does not yet allow a clean line to be drawn. But the older evidence shows that Luzon is not a late accidental stop. Human relatives reached the island deep in the past. That fact raises the same hard problem seen on Flores, but in a slightly different form. Luzon is not connected to mainland Asia by dry land during low sea levels in the simple way that some other regions are. Water crossings are required. How ancient hominins arrived there remains debated. They may have crossed accidentally on natural rafts after storms or floods. They may have used simple watercraft, though direct evidence for such technology at that time is absent. They may have moved through island chains in ways that leave almost no trace, because coastlines from those periods are now submerged. No single explanation fully accounts for this movement. What is clear is that ancient humans and their relatives were not always confined by the boundaries once imagined for them. The Luzon fossils also unsettle the idea that Southeast Asia was occupied by only one or two simple branches of humanity. For a long time, Homo erectus stands as the dominant ancient human figure in the region, especially because of famous finds from Java. Then Flores adds a small-bodied island species. Denisovan genetics adds a hidden population whose bones are barely known. Luzon adds another fragmentary but distinct form. The result is not a tidy family tree but a broken thicket. Island Southeast Asia begins to look like a place where lineages arrive, become isolated, shrink, change, persist, and sometimes vanish before leaving much behind. The islands are not empty stepping stones. They're evolutionary chambers. In such chambers, small populations can become unusual quickly by evolutionary standards. Isolation limits gene flow. Resources shape bodies. Local dangers shape behavior. Chance becomes powerful. A trait that would remain rare in a large connected population may become common in a small isolated one. A lineage may preserve ancient features long after related mainland populations have changed. Another may evolve new proportions or combinations of traits that appear strange when compared to better-known fossils. Luzon's ancient humans may belong to this kind of island story, where separation does not freeze life in place, but pushes it down unexpected paths. Their daily lives remain difficult to picture. The fossils do not preserve tools securely tied to every bone, nor do they reveal clothing, language, shelter beyond the cave, or social structure. Yet they were not abstractions. They moved through humid forests and limestone landscapes. They found food in a world of river valleys, animals, plants, storms, and seasonal change. They endured illness, injury, childhood, hunger, and old age if they lived long enough to reach it. They may have known the cave as shelter, landmark, or repeated stopping place. Their world is gone not because it was unreal, but because tropical time is especially efficient at erasing human traces. Homo luzonensis leaves the story with a feeling of incompletion. Flores offers a partial skeleton and a clearer image of an island human body. Luzon offers scattered pieces and a harder mystery, yet those pieces matter because they widen the field of possibility. They show that even late in prehistory, different human forms may have lived across nearby islands, each with its own history and fate. By the time modern humans move through the region, they may be entering a world already filled with older island lineages, some visible only as teeth and curved bones in caves. The hidden human species beside us were not only in icy Europe or Siberian mountains, some lived in green islands, behind sea barriers, in places where the forest closes quickly over the past and leaves only fragments for the future to find. Beyond the caves, islands, teeth, and broken bones, another archive waits in a place that no archaeologist can excavate with a trowel. It lies inside living people. It is carried silently through families, reshuffled in each generation, thinned by time, broken into smaller pieces, yet still readable under the right methods. The genome becomes a landscape of its own, and in that landscape scientists begin to find traces of vanished humans who may never be known from a skull or a named site. Some are familiar now, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. Others are more elusive, appearing only as strange patterns that do not fit the expected inheritance of modern human populations. These are sometimes called ghost populations, not because they are supernatural, but because their bodies have not yet been found. They are presences without faces. The idea is both simple and difficult. When different human groups meet and have children, pieces of ancestry pass from one population into another. Over thousands of years, those inherited segments become shorter as generations mix and recombine DNA. A long block may become a few scattered fragments. A visible contribution may fade until it is only a faint statistical signal. Yet if enough genomes are compared, and if scientists understand the expected patterns of inheritance, those fragments can reveal that an ancient encounter took place. The dead leave no words, but their descendants may still carry molecular traces of meetings that happened before farming, before cities, before writing, before any remembered nation or tribe. Neanderthal ancestry is the clearest example outside Africa. Most people whose recent ancestry lies beyond sub-Saharan Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal-derived DNA. The amount is modest, usually only a few percent or less, but its meaning is large. It shows that when some Homo sapiens populations expanded beyond Africa and entered Western Eurasia, they encountered Neanderthals closely enough for interbreeding to leave a lasting mark. Those ancient unions were not a single event imagined in one valley. They likely happened in more than one place and time, among small groups moving through complex landscapes. The genetic evidence remains incomplete in its human detail, but it is firm in its central message. The boundary between the two populations was permeable. Denisovan ancestry is more geographically uneven, and that unevenness is part of the mystery. Some populations in island Southeast Asia and Oceania carry notable Denisovan-related ancestry, while other populations have smaller or different traces. This pattern suggests that modern humans met Denisovan-related groups somewhere in Asia, perhaps more than once, and perhaps with different Denisovan populations contributing to different descendants. The Denisovans of the Altai Mountains may not be the same as the Denisovan-related people who left ancestry and ancestors of Papuans, Aboriginal Australians, or other groups in the region. Scholars still debate the number and location of these encounters. The signal points toward a broad hidden world, but the fossils remain too few to draw its borders. This is where DNA becomes stranger than bone. A fossil can say, "Here is one individual in one place." A genetic signal can say, "There was once a population large enough, widespread enough, or connected enough to leave descendants across thousands of kilometers, even if its skeletons have not been clearly identified." Denisovan ancestry in living people hints at a human presence across parts of Asia that the ground has barely revealed. The genome sees shadows where archaeology has only darkness. It does not replace fossils, but it exposes the scale of what fossils may be missing. The method is not magic. It depends on comparison, probability, and careful modelling. Scientists compare ancient genomes with modern genomes and with each other. They look for segments that appear unusually divergent, meaning they split from known modern human lineages far earlier than expected. They estimate when admixture may have occurred by measuring the length of inherited segments. Longer segments usually suggest more recent mixture. Shorter ones suggest older events, though the story can become complicated by later population movements and repeated mixing. No single explanation fully accounts for every pattern, and models can change when new ancient DNA appears. But the broad method has already transformed prehistory. It has turned living bodies into evidence for vanished neighbours. A lesser-known detail is that ancient DNA does not have to come only from bones. Sediments in caves can preserve traces of genetic material shed by humans and animals, skin cells, waste, decayed tissues, and microscopic remains absorbed into the ground. In some places, scientists can detect the presence of Neanderthals, Denisovans, or other animals in sediment layers even when no visible bone is found. This does not provide a full body, and contamination or dating must be handled with extreme care. But it opens another way to read human presence. A cave floor may hold genetic echoes of those who passed through it, even after their bones have crumbled away. Still, the genome has its own silences. DNA survives best in cold, dry, stable conditions. It decays quickly in heat and humidity. This means that the places most likely to hold lost human diversity, especially tropical Africa and Southeast Asia, are often the places least likely to preserve ancient DNA. The map of genetic discovery is therefore uneven. Siberia speaks clearly because cold helps preserve molecules. Tropical caves whisper or fall silent. The absence of DNA from a region cannot be treated as proof that no hidden humans lived there. It may only mean that chemistry has erased their evidence. Ghost populations become especially important when scientists notice ancestry that seems older or stranger than expected, but cannot yet be matched to Neanderthals, Denisovans, or any known fossil group. In some cases, these signals may reflect unsampled branches of Denisovans or deeply separated modern human populations. In others, they may suggest interbreeding with archaic humans whose bones remain unidentified. The words used here matter. A ghost population is not automatically a new species. It may be a population within a broader lineage, a sister group, a deeply divergent branch, or something that later discoveries will rename. The evidence must be handled carefully, because genetics can reveal separation and mixture more easily than it can reveal faces, tools, beliefs, or exact identities. What these ghost signals do reveal is that human evolution is not a clean replacement story. It is a story of contact. Modern humans absorb ancestry from relatives in Eurasia. Some inherited fragments fade, others remain because they are neutral, doing little harm or good. A few may spread because they help with immunity, altitude, metabolism, or adaptation to local environments. Yet even beneficial inheritance should not be romanticized. Most ancient DNA survives through ordinary reproduction and chance, not because every fragment carries a dramatic function. The genome is not a museum of perfect adaptations. It is a messy inheritance from real populations living under pressure. The hidden species beside us, then, are hidden in two ways. Some are buried in caves and islands, waiting for discovery. Others are buried inside the living, broken into fragments too small to feel, but not too small to study. Each genetic trace points backward toward a meeting without a scene, a child without a remembered name, a population without a known homeland. The bones show that the ancient world was crowded. The genome shows that the crowd touched, mingled, and sometimes endured inside the last human species left standing. The genetic ghosts inside living people point outward across Eurasia, toward Neanderthal valleys, Denisovan mountains, and island worlds where small bones survive under cave floors. But the oldest and perhaps most difficult mystery turns back toward Africa, where the roots of Homo sapiens reach deepest, and where the record is both richest in importance and frustratingly incomplete in detail. Africa is often described as the birthplace of modern humans, but that phrase can make the story sound too simple, as if one population appears in one place and then sends descendants into the world. The evidence now suggests something more complicated, slower, and more scattered. Modern humans seem to emerge from a continent-wide web of populations, separated and reconnected by climate, distance, rivers, deserts, forests, and time. In that web, there may have been human relatives who left few fossils, no clear names, and only faint traces in living genomes. Africa is too large, too varied, and too ancient to be treated as one cradle. The continent holds deserts that become green during wet phases, forests that expand and retreat, highlands that isolate communities, coastlines that shift with sea level, and river systems that open pathways across otherwise difficult lands. Early Homo sapiens does not arise in a blank landscape. Other human forms and deeply diverged populations are already part of the African background. Some may belong to lineages close to modern humans. Others may preserve older traits. Still others may not fit easily into categories created from a small number of fossil finds. What survives in the record suggests diversity, not a single smooth transformation. The fossils themselves show this unevenness. At Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, early Homo sapiens-like remains dated to roughly 300,000 years ago reveal faces that look surprisingly modern in some ways, while the brain case still differs from later human forms. In eastern Africa, remains from sites such as Omokibish and Herto add other pieces to the story, showing populations with combinations of modern and archaic traits over long spans of time. In southern Africa, other fossils and archaeological records point to additional regional histories. These remains do not form a neat line of improvement. They look more like surviving snapshots from a much broader population history, where different traits appear in different places and become connected over time through movement and interbreeding. The missing relatives of Africa are difficult to define because the boundary between species, subspecies, population, and lineage becomes blurred in deep time. In Eurasia, Neanderthals and Denisovans can be compared against modern humans with clearer genetic separation. Even if their own histories are complex, in Africa, the picture is harder because the ancestors of Homo sapiens are already there, and many branches may be closely related. A fossil with archaic features may represent a separate human population, a regional variant of early Homo sapiens, or a lineage that contributed ancestry to later humans. Scholars still debate how to classify some remains because anatomy does not always preserve clean categories. The evidence remains incomplete, and the labels often lag behind the complexity of the past. One of the most intriguing clues comes from genetics. Some studies of present-day African populations have found patterns that may suggest ancient mixture with deeply divergent human populations within Africa. These signals are not as easy to interpret as Neanderthal ancestry outside Africa, partly because Africa contains the deepest diversity among living humans, and because ancient DNA from tropical regions is rare. A strange genetic pattern may point to archaic admixture, but it may also reflect long-standing structure within early modern human populations. No single explanation fully accounts for every signal. Still, the possibility is powerful. Some African groups may have encountered and absorbed ancestry from human relatives whose bones have not yet been identified, or whose fossils are sitting unnamed in the record. This is not a fringe idea when stated carefully. It does not require lost civilizations, impossible technologies, or hidden kingdoms. It only requires what is already known from Eurasia. Ancient human populations met and mixed. If Neanderthals and Denisovans contributed ancestry to later humans outside Africa, then it is reasonable to consider that Africa, with its deeper and older human diversity, may also have held populations that interacted with ancestors of modern people. The difficult part is proving exactly who those populations were, where they lived, when they met, and whether they should be called separate species or deeply divided branches within a larger human family. Climate makes the mystery even harder. During wetter periods, the Sahara can transform into a landscape of lakes, rivers, grasslands, and animals, allowing movement between northern and sub-Saharan Africa. During dry periods, it becomes a vast barrier, splitting populations apart. Forest belts shift, savannas open and close, coastal zones become refuges. In such a world, human groups may spend thousands of years apart, developing regional differences, then meet again when the environment changes. Their separations may be long enough to leave genetic structure, but not always long enough to produce obvious fossil differences. The continent itself acts like a breathing system, alternately dividing and reconnecting its human inhabitants. A lesser-known detail is that some late-surviving African fossils have combinations of traits that challenge simple timelines. Remains such as those from Iwo Eleru in West Africa, dated much later than expected for their archaic-looking features, have been discussed as evidence that ancient diversity may have persisted in some regions for a long time. Interpretations remain debated, and one fossil cannot carry too much weight. But finds like this remind researchers that human variation did not vanish instantly once modern anatomy appeared. Older-looking traits could persist in isolated populations, mix into later groups, or reflect the uneven pace of change across the continent. The archaeological record adds another layer without solving the whole puzzle. The African Middle Stone Age shows a wide range of tools, pigments, points, blades, prepared cores, ornaments in some regions, and evidence of flexible behavior across different environments. But tool traditions do not map neatly onto biological populations. Similar tools can be made by different groups. Different tools can be made by related people in different environments. A stone point does not reveal the exact face of its maker. A pigment fragment does not identify a species. What survives in the record suggests intelligence and adaptability across many communities, but it does not always say where one lineage ends and another begins. Africa's missing relatives are therefore hidden in plain sight. They are hidden by poor preservation, by vast unsampled regions, by fossils too fragmentary to classify, by genetic signals that remain difficult to model, and by the deep closeness of the populations involved. They are not ghosts on the edge of the human story. They may be part of the very process that made Homo sapiens what it is. The last human species may not have emerged from replacing all others in Africa, but from a long history of separation, survival, and reunion among many human communities. The hidden neighbour may not always have stood across a valley as a visibly different form. Sometimes the neighbour may have looked almost like us, close enough to disappear into ancestry without leaving a clear name behind. Where different human worlds approach one another, the meeting is unlikely to look like a single dramatic moment. It is more often a slow pressure along the edge of a landscape. A group follows reindeer across a cold plain and finds stone flakes already scattered near a shelter. Another moves along a river valley and discovers that the best crossing place has been used before. A cave that offers protection from winter wind may hold ashes from older fires, bones split for marrow, and tools made in a style slightly different from their own. The first sign of another humanity may not be a face. It may be a footprint in damp sediment, a broken core of flint, a carcass already stripped, smoke in the distance, or the uneasy absence of animals from a valley where animals should be. Contact between ancient human groups has to be imagined carefully, because the evidence remains incomplete. The record rarely preserves a direct encounter. It does not show the first glance between a modern human and a Neanderthal, or the moment a Denisovan-related group notices strangers moving through mountain country. What it preserves are overlapping dates, shared regions, layers in caves, tool traditions that appear near one another, genetic traces that prove some meetings became biological, and occasional hints that different populations use the same places across time. These are not scenes in the ordinary sense. They are pressure marks left by lives moving through the same world. The edge zones matter most. In the Near East, for example, the landscapes linking Africa and Eurasia become crossroads across deep time. Climate opens and closes routes, wooded corridors, grasslands, river systems, and coastal passages allow populations to move when conditions are favourable. At different times, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens occupy parts of this broad region. They may not always be present together, and scholars still debate the exact timing and nature of overlap at particular sites. Yet the region shows how ancient humans can pass through the same ecological doorway in alternating waves. A cave may shelter one group in one climate phase and another group in a later one. The place remains, while the inhabitants change. In Europe, the arrival of modern humans into Neanderthal territories adds another layer of tension. Neanderthals have known these regions for an immense span of time. Their knowledge is local and inherited, bound to stone sources, animal migrations, seasonal shelters, and the dangers of cold. Modern humans arrive with their own traditions, social networks, tools, ornaments, and ways of moving through the land. The overlap is not necessarily constant across the continent. Some areas may see little direct contact, others may become zones of proximity, where groups know of one another even without living side by side. No single explanation fully accounts for what happens across such a wide area, because Europe itself is not one environment. It is a shifting mosaic of refuges, open plains, forests, rivers, mountains, and coastlines. Competition is possible, but it should not be imagined only as open violence. Ancient competition can be quiet and relentless. Two groups may need the same herds, the same caves, the same high-quality flint, the same sheltered valleys, the same narrow seasonal routes. A population does not have to be attacked to be pushed into difficulty. It can lose access to a favoured hunting ground. It can find prey reduced. It can be forced into poorer territory during a hard winter. It can shrink because neighbouring groups expand into the best places. In small populations, even modest pressure can matter. A few failed seasons, fewer births, more deaths, and reduced contact with other bands may slowly weaken a community that had survived for thousands of years. But contact is not only competition. Ancient humans are observant. They notice tools, tracks, shelters, and patterns. They may learn indirectly from abandoned camps. They may collect useful objects left behind. They may copy techniques without peaceful exchange in the modern sense. A stone tool tradition can spread for many reasons, and not all of them require friendly contact. Ideas can move through imitation, through captives, through mixed families, through neighbouring groups, through children growing up between worlds, or through repeated observation over generations. The archaeological record can show changes in tools and ornaments, but it cannot always reveal the social path by which those changes travel. Caves become especially powerful witnesses because they concentrate traces. A good cave is not merely a hole in rock. It is shelter, storage place, lookout, refuge from predators, windbreak, and landmark. Different human groups may return to the same cave because the landscape makes it useful. One layer may contain Neanderthal remains or tools. Another may hold evidence associated with modern humans. In Denisova Cave, the same place preserves traces of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and a direct mixed ancestry child. This does not mean all three groups sit together around one hearth in one continuous community. The timing is more complex than that. Still, the cave shows that certain places draw human life repeatedly, and where life repeats, contact becomes more possible. Shared prey creates another form of contact. Large animals shape the movements of humans across Ice Age landscapes. Mammoth, horse, bison, deer, wild cattle, ibex, and other animals are not simply food. They are moving resources that determine routes, camps, labour, risk, and cooperation. A herd crossing a valley may attract more than one human group. A dead animal may become a contested prize. A hunting region may become known to different communities over long periods. Around such prey, humans must read not only animal signs but the signs of other hunters. The hidden species beside us are not living in separate museum cases. They are moving through overlapping food webs. Climate adds pressure to every encounter. During unstable periods, habitable zones shift, cold deepens, forest retreat, sea levels fall, drought spread, then warmth returns, and the map changes again. Human groups that once remained apart may suddenly find themselves pushed into the same refuges. Others may be isolated by expanding deserts or ice. Contact is not simply a matter of curiosity. It is often a consequence of environmental compression. When good land shrinks, populations meet at the edges. When corridors open, they move through one another's former worlds. The evidence remains incomplete, but this rhythm of separation and contact appears again and again in the deep human past. The human side of such encounters remains the hardest to recover. These groups may have recognized one another as different, but the nature of that recognition is unknowable. Some differences would be visible in body shape, face, clothing or ornament, movement, tool use, and perhaps smell or voice. Other differences may have been subtle. Neanderthals and modern humans are close enough biologically to produce children, yet distinct enough to have separate evolutionary histories. Denisovans are known too poorly in body form to imagine with confidence. Island humans, such as those on Flores or Luzon, may have seemed more strikingly different if modern humans ever encountered them directly. Scholars still debate these possibilities because no preserved scene can answer them. What can be said is that ancient contact is not a simple line between us and them. It is a boundary crossed by movement, need, imitation, avoidance, desire, fear, and accident. The world of many humans is not peaceful by default, and it is not warlike by default. It is practical, dangerous, and intimate in ways the record only partly preserves. At the edge of a cave, beside a carcass, along a river crossing, or under a changing sky, different kinds of humans may have measured one another without names that survive. Their encounters leave almost nothing in memory, but enough in bone, stone, and DNA to show that the last human species did not rise in isolation. It moved through a world already marked by other hands. The boundary between ancient human groups is crossed not only by footsteps through valleys or by tools left beside old fires. It is crossed in the most enduring way a boundary can be crossed, through children. Long after the camps vanish, long after the bones break and the caves fill with sediment, the evidence of those crossings remains inside living bodies. This is one of the quietest and most powerful discoveries in the study of human origins. The hidden species beside Homo sapiens were not merely neighbours seen at a distance. Some became ancestors, not to all people equally, not in a simple pattern, and not as separate peoples who survived into history, but as fragments of inheritance carried forward by the last human species. The first great shock comes from Neanderthal DNA. When ancient genomes reveal that many people outside Africa carry small amounts of Neanderthal ancestry, the old replacement story changes. Modern humans did not simply expand out of Africa and erase every other human group without biological contact. Somewhere in Western Eurasia, likely in more than one encounter across time, some Homo sapiens groups and Neanderthal groups had children together. Those children entered the ancestry of later populations. Their descendants moved, multiplied, mixed again, and carried small pieces of Neanderthal DNA into the present. The percentage is usually modest, but the implication is immense. Extinction did not prevent inheritance. This does not mean Neanderthals survive as a separate living population. They do not. Their languages, if they had languages in any form that could be called that, are gone. Their regional traditions are gone. Their independent communities disappear. But disappearance is not the same as total erasure. A fragment of genetic material can outlast a world. It can pass through thousands of generations without anyone knowing its origin. It can be carried by people who build farms, cities, ships, books, and machines, never suspecting that part of their immune system or skin biology may include traces from Ice Age relatives who once lived among cold valleys and limestone caves. Some inherited Neanderthal variants appear to have influenced immunity, inflammation, skin and hair traits, metabolism, and responses to pathogens. This makes sense in broad terms, because Neanderthals had lived in Eurasian environments for hundreds of thousands of years before many modern human groups arrived there. They may have carried genetic variants shaped by local climates, diets, microbes, and seasonal pressures. When modern humans entered those regions, some inherited variants from Neanderthals may have been useful in adapting to unfamiliar conditions, yet the story should not be simplified into a treasure chest of helpful genes. Many Neanderthal-derived variants likely did little. Some may have been harmful. Natural selection appears to have removed Neanderthal ancestry from some parts of the modern human genome more strongly than from others, suggesting that not all ancient mixture was biologically easy. This is an important point, because interbreeding between close human relatives does not mean there were no differences. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were compatible enough to produce fertile descendants, at least in some cases. But they had been separated long enough for genetic differences to matter. Some inherited combinations may have reduced fitness. Some may have affected male fertility or development. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the precise effects. But the uneven survival of Neanderthal DNA across the genome suggests that ancient mixture was filtered by time. What remains today is not a full record of every union. It is the residue of inheritance after thousands of generations of selection, drift, recombination, and loss. Denisovan ancestry tells a different but equally striking story. In some populations of Oceania and parts of Asia, Denisovan-related ancestry survives at higher levels than Neanderthal ancestry does in many other groups. This implies contact between modern humans and Denisovan-related populations somewhere in Asia, perhaps in multiple places, perhaps with more than one Denisovan branch. One of the best-known examples of Denisovan legacy involves adaptation to high altitude among Tibetans, where a genetic variant associated with life in low-oxygen environments appears to have entered modern human ancestry from Denisovan-related people. This does not mean Denisovans are reduced to a single useful gene, and it does not mean every high-altitude adaptation has one source. But it shows that an extinct human relative could leave behind an inheritance that later becomes important in a particular landscape. The Tibetan example also changes the emotional weight of the Denisovan story. The Denisovans are known from so little bone that they almost seem unreal. Yet one of their inherited traces may help living people breathe more effectively on one of the hardest inhabited landscapes on Earth. A population nearly invisible in fossils leaves a practical echo in blood and oxygen. The hidden human becomes not a curiosity of the cave, but a participant in later survival. What survives in the record suggests that ancient mixture was not just a biological accident with no consequences. Sometimes, under the right conditions, it may have shaped how later humans met the world. Still, adaptation is only one part of the story. Most inherited ancestry does not need to have a dramatic purpose. Much of it may persist simply because it is neutral or nearly neutral, carried along as populations grow and move. Some fragments survive because no force strongly removes them. Others disappear by chance. Ancient DNA is not a moral inheritance, and it is not a ranking of human worth. It is a record of contact among populations that lived before modern identities existed. The people who carried these fragments across time did not know they were carrying Neanderthal or Denisovan ancestry. They were simply living, having children, surviving local pressures, and passing forward whatever inheritance chance and selection allowed. Interbreeding also reveals something about the social world that bones cannot fully describe. A genetic contribution means that at least some mixed children survived and were accepted into communities that continued. This may have happened in many ways. A small group of modern humans may have absorbed individuals from another population. A mixed child may have grown within a Homo sapiens band. Encounters may have been peaceful, coercive, ordinary, rare, or shaped by circumstances that cannot be recovered. No single explanation fully accounts for the human reality behind the genetic signal. The genome proves reproduction, but it does not preserve consent, kinship, language, grief, or belonging. The hidden species beside us therefore become part of a deeper story about survival through mixture. Homo sapiens survives not as a sealed and untouched lineage, but as one that encounters others and sometimes incorporates pieces of them. This does not diminish modern humans. It makes the story more realistic. Life expands by movement and contact. Populations rarely remain pure in nature. They meet at edges, exchange genes, absorb strangers, and change. The last human species carries evidence of this older world not as a visible mark, but as a scattered archive inside the genome. By the time the other humans vanish as independent populations, the crossings have already happened. A Neanderthal community may disappear from a valley, but a child descended partly from Neanderthals may live elsewhere among modern humans. A Denisovan-related population may fade from an Asian landscape, but a small part of its inheritance may travel toward mountains, islands, and coasts. The species disappear. Yet the boundary they once shared with Homo sapiens leaves a trace that cannot be placed back into the ground. It travels forward, hidden in ordinary bodies, making every simple story of human separation less certain, and every surviving human life a little more crowded with the past. The disappearance of the other humans does not happen like a door closing everywhere at once. It is slower, patchier, and more uneven than that. One population fades in a cold western valley while another continues farther south. One island lineage survives behind deep water barriers, while another group on the mainland is absorbed or replaced. A cave stops receiving visitors. A hunting ground is abandoned. A chain of families becomes too thin to repair itself. From a distance of tens of thousands of years, extinction can look like a clean fact. but on the ground it is made of ordinary losses: fewer children, fewer allies, fewer roots, fewer safe winters, fewer chances for a scattered people to find one another again. Climate is the first great pressure because it shapes every other pressure beneath it. During the late Pleistocene, the world does not offer a stable background for human survival. Ice expands and retreats, sea levels fall and rise, rainfall belts shift, forests become grasslands, then forests again, rivers change course, deserts widen, then soften during wetter phases. Animals follow the plants, and humans follow the animals. For groups already living in small numbers, these changes can be brutal. A familiar valley may lose the herds that once passed through it. A coastal refuge may drown beneath rising water. A forest edge that supplied plants, wood, and prey may move beyond reach. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives in the record suggests that many ancient human populations live close to ecological limits, even when they are skilled and resilient. Neanderthals show this vulnerability clearly. They survive for hundreds of thousands of years, which is not the record of a failed people. Yet late Neanderthal populations appear to become smaller and more fragmented in some regions. Fragmentation matters because survival is not only about one band enduring one winter, it is about networks. Groups need partners, mates, shared knowledge, and occasional movement between communities. When populations shrink into isolated pockets, chance becomes more dangerous. A disease, a harsh season, an injury to a key hunter, or the loss of several children can have consequences far beyond a single household. In large connected populations, losses can be absorbed. In small isolated ones, they can become irreversible. Modern humans entering Eurasia may add pressure, but the nature of that pressure is still debated. It is tempting to imagine a simple contest, with Homo sapiens defeating Neanderthals through superior tools or sharper minds. That picture is too neat. Neanderthals are capable, experienced, and deeply adapted to their landscapes. Modern humans may have advantages in wider social networks, long-distance exchange, symbolic communication, flexible technology, or population size. But no single explanation fully accounts for the disappearance of Neanderthals across all regions. The more likely reality is cumulative. Climate instability weakens some populations. Small numbers reduce resilience. Modern human expansion increases competition for prey, shelter, and raw materials. Interbreeding absorbs some ancestry. Local extinctions occur at different times. What remains afterward looks like replacement, but the process is made of many forces moving together. Disease may also have mattered, though it is harder to see in the record. When populations that have been separated for long periods come into contact, they may carry different pathogens or different immune histories. Later human history offers many examples of disease reshaping societies after contact, but applying that too directly to the deep past is risky. The evidence for specific ancient epidemics among Neanderthals, Denisovans, or island humans is limited. Still, pathogens form part of the invisible environment. They can move with people, animals, and parasites. They can weaken communities already under stress. Scholars still debate how much disease contributed to archaic human decline, but it remains one plausible thread among many, not a single master key. Technology is another uneven factor. Modern humans in some regions develop blade industries, bone tools, ornaments, tailored clothing, and long-distance movement of materials. These behaviors may reflect broader social connections and more flexible planning, but technology should not be treated as a magic weapon. A stone blade does not automatically defeat a well-made flake tool. An ornament does not feed a child. The real advantage may lie in the social world behind the objects. A group with wider exchange networks can obtain stone from far away, maintain alliances, share information about distant resources, and recover after local hardship. If modern human groups are more densely connected in some regions, they may survive disruptions that smaller Neanderthal groups cannot. On islands, extinction follows a different rhythm. Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis live in worlds where isolation both protects and endangers. Sea barriers may shield small populations from mainland competition for long periods. They allow unusual traits to develop and persist, but the same isolation can become a trap. A small island population has limited room to retreat when the environment changes. A volcanic eruption, a shift in prey, the loss of a key animal species, or the arrival of a new human group can transform the balance quickly. Flores, with its volcanic landscapes and unusual animals, shows how fragile island ecologies can be. The disappearance of Homo floresiensis may involve environmental change, volcanic disturbance, modern human arrival, or some combination still not fully understood. Denisovans are harder to discuss because their physical record is so sparse. Their genetic legacy suggests a wide and complicated presence, but their disappearance as a distinct population is not visible in the same way as Neanderthal decline. They may not have vanished in one event or from one region. Different Denisovan-related groups may have persisted in different parts of Asia, mixed with modern humans at different times, and faded unevenly into later ancestry. The word disappearance may hide several separate endings. Some groups may die out, some may be absorbed, some may leave descendants only through a few ancient unions. Without more fossils, the shape of their final history remains largely hidden. There is also the force that rarely receives enough attention: chance. Evolutionary stories often sound as if every outcome is inevitable, as if Homo sapiens survives because it must. The deeper record is less comforting. A population can disappear because a corridor closes at the wrong time, because a drought lasts too long, because a small group fails to find mates, because children do not survive enough winters, because a local tradition breaks when too few elders remain. None of these events has to be dramatic. Together, they can erase a people. The hidden human species beside us may have vanished not because they were foolish or doomed, but because survival is never guaranteed, even for the intelligent. The final disappearance of the others therefore looks less like a verdict and more like a convergence of pressures. Climate shifts the land. Small populations lose resilience. Competition changes access to resources. Isolation limits recovery. Interbreeding carries fragments forward while dissolving separate identities. Disease and chance move invisibly through the background. By the end, Homo sapiens remains, but not because the path was simple or morally meaningful. The last human standing is also the beneficiary of accidents, mixtures, migrations, and conditions that could have turned differently. The vanished relatives leave behind a warning written in fragments: intelligence helps, culture helps, cooperation helps. But no human world is immune to the slow arithmetic of loss. The vanished humans are not hidden only because they were rare, distant, or poorly understood. They are hidden because the Earth is a severe editor. It keeps some evidence and destroys far more. A group can occupy a valley for centuries, return to the same river bend, teach children how to shape stone, and vanish from the record because rain, roots, animals, acidity, and time break everything down. Fossils feel permanent when they sit behind glass, but fossilization is an accident, not a promise. Bone is living material before it becomes evidence. After death, It is exposed to weather, scavengers, trampling, water, soil chemistry, bacteria, and pressure. Most bodies are never buried in the right conditions. Some are consumed by carnivores. Some decay in soils too acidic for preservation. A skeleton must pass through a narrow gate of chance to become a fossil-quick burial. Favourable chemistry, protection from disturbance, and enough time for minerals to stabilise what remains. Even then. Later erosion can destroy the deposit before anyone finds it. The evidence remains incomplete not because ancient humans were unimportant, but because preservation is brutally selective. Caves help, which is why they appear so often in the story. Limestone chambers can shelter bones from open weather, catch sediment, and preserve layers of occupation that would disappear outside. A cave can hold hearths, tools, animal bones, human teeth, and traces of DNA in sediment. But caves also distort the picture. They are not where all humans lived. They are where evidence is more likely to survive. A species that often used caves may seem more visible than one that lived mostly in forests, wetlands, open plains, or coastal camps. The record does not simply show where people were. It shows where the planet allowed their traces to remain. Coastlines are among the greatest missing archives. During glacial periods, sea levels fall, exposing broad coastal plains that later drown when the ice melts. These lost landscapes may have been rich places for humans full of shellfish, fish, birds, freshwater, plants, and easier travel routes than mountains or deserts. Modern humans likely use such coasts in many regions, and earlier human relatives may have used them too. Yet many camps, paths, and burial places now lie beneath water. Sediment, coral, or shifting continental shelves. If ancient encounters happened along these shores, the evidence may be unreachable or destroyed. Tropical regions create another silence. Heat and humidity are enemies of ancient bone and DNA. Forest soils can be acidic, roots can break fragile remains, and water can move sediments out of order. This matters because some of the most important regions for hidden human diversity are tropical Africa and Southeast Asia, where lineages may have survived, mixed, and changed while preservation remained poor. The lack of fossils in a tropical forest does not mean no one lived there. It may mean that the forest has eaten the evidence. Even when fossils survive, they are often fragmentary. A tooth may be enough to suggest something unusual, but not enough to describe a body. A jaw can reveal strength, diet, and ancestry, but not the full shape of a face. A finger bone can contain DNA, but without DNA it may be almost mute. A skull fragment may be argued over for decades. Scientists must compare tiny remains against known fossils, living anatomy, geological context, and dating methods. Each method has limits. Sediments can shift, layers can be disturbed, dates may be refined, corrected, or overturned. Scholars still debate many finds not because the science is careless, but because deep time often gives only damaged evidence. Museum drawers add another complication. Fossils found decades ago were sometimes classified under broad labels because researchers lacked modern tools, ancient DNA, or the comparative collections available today. A bone once called archaic Homo sapiens, late Homo erectus, or simply indeterminate may deserve a new look. Some hidden humans may already have been found, but not recognized. Others may be represented by remains too incomplete to name responsibly. Scientific caution can be frustrating, but it matters. Naming a new species from fragments is powerful, and it can mislead if done too quickly. Stone tools survive far better than bodies, but tools do not map neatly onto species. A tool tradition may be made by one group in one region and another group elsewhere. A population can adopt a new method. Different populations can make similar tools because similar problems invite similar solutions. The same cave may contain tools from different times, made by different humans, layered in ways that seem clear until dating improves. A blade, scraper, or point is evidence of skill. But it is not a signature written with a name. The maker remains partly hidden behind the object. Ancient DNA has opened astonishing doors, but it cannot rescue every lost population. DNA decays, and contamination is always a danger. Cold places preserve it best, which gives Siberia and parts of Europe an advantage over hotter regions. Sediment DNA can reveal presence, but it may not provide enough detail to reconstruct a whole population. Proteins can survive longer than DNA in some cases and help identify relationships, as with the Denisovan-linked jaw from the Tibetan plateau. But proteins also have limits. Each technique illuminates a different part of the darkness. None removes the darkness entirely. The fossil problem is therefore not a side issue. It is central to the mystery. The hidden human species beside us are hidden partly because most of the ancient world has been erased before science ever arrives. Every discovery is surrounded by a much larger absence. Neanderthals seem vivid because enough bones survived. Denisovans seem ghostly because their bodies did not. Floras and Luzon appear extraordinary, partly because tropical islands almost never give up such evidence at all. Africa may hold the deepest missing diversity, but much of it lies behind poor preservation, unsampled regions, and fossils that do not fit easy categories. This makes the story less certain, but more alive. The record is not a complete courtroom file. It is a shoreline after a storm, scattered with objects from a vanished ship. A tooth here, a tool there, a layer of ash, a broken mandible, a pulse of ancestry inside living people. From these fragments, scientists build careful arguments, revise old maps, and accept that many pages are gone. The hidden humans may seem distant, but the difficulty of finding them is itself a reminder of how fragile all human presence can be. A species can live, adapt, meet others, leave descendants, and still be known only by what chance refused to destroy. The broken record of ancient humanity invites wonder, but it also invites confusion. A jaw appears with unusual proportions. A skull has a mixture of traits that do not fit a familiar category. A tooth is too large, a brow too heavy, a date too late, a tool too old for the story people expected. In the space between evidence and imagination, strange claims gather quickly. Some belong to serious scientific debate, where cautious researchers argue over anatomy, dating, and classification. Others belong to popular speculation, where every odd bone becomes a lost species, every gap becomes proof of a hidden race, and every uncertainty is treated as permission to invent. The difficulty is that the real story is already strange enough. It does not need exaggeration, it needs patience. The naming of a human species is never a small act. A fossil may look unusual because it belongs to a distinct lineage. It may also look unusual because it comes from an individual with disease, developmental variation, injury, age-related change, or local population differences. A small sample can make ordinary variation look extraordinary. A single jaw or tooth can be important, but it cannot always carry the weight of a new branch on the human family tree. Scholars still debate many finds because classification in human evolution is not simply a matter of measuring bones and placing them into boxes. It is a question of ancestry, variation, geography, time, and comparison with fossils that are themselves incomplete. Homo floresiensis shows how difficult this can be. When the small skeleton from Liangbua first becomes known, some critics argue that it may represent a modern human with a pathological condition rather than a separate species. The tiny brain, short body, and unusual anatomy seem so unexpected that disease is proposed as an explanation. Over time, broader anatomical study, additional remains, and the context of the island make the distinct species interpretation much stronger in mainstream science. Yet the debate matters because it shows how extraordinary claims must be tested. Flores is not accepted as a lost human species because it is fascinating. It is accepted because repeated lines of evidence make that explanation more convincing than the alternatives. Other fossils remain more unsettled. In China, several ancient human remains have sparked debate because they combine features that seem modern in some ways and archaic in others. The Harbin skull, sometimes popularly called Dragon Man, has been argued by some researchers to represent a distinct lineage, possibly close to Denisovans, or relevant to a broader Middle Pleistocene Asian population. But without a full genetic link, the classification remains debated. It may represent a new species, a known population under another name, or part of a wider pattern of variation among ancient Asian humans. The evidence remains incomplete, and the name attached to a fossil can sometimes sound more certain than the science behind it. The same caution applies to fossils from places such as Dali, Jinyushan, Hualongdong, and other Asian sites that have been discussed in relation to archaic Homo sapiens, Denisovan-related populations, Homo erectus descendants, or other Middle Pleistocene groups. These bones matter greatly because they may preserve traces of human diversity across Eastern Asia, a region still underrepresented compared with Europe. But they do not yet form a simple cast of named characters. They are pieces of a puzzle whose edges have not been found. Some may eventually connect to Denisovans. Others may represent separate regional histories. Others may be reinterpreted as new evidence appears. No single explanation fully accounts for all of them. Africa has its own disputed bones. Some fossils with archaic features survive surprisingly late, while others show modern traits earlier than once expected. The result is a continent-wide pattern that resists a clean line between archaic and modern. A skull may not be a hidden species in the dramatic sense. It may instead be evidence that early Homo sapiens itself was deeply diverse, with populations carrying different combinations of traits across regions. This is less sensational than declaring a new species, but it may be closer to the truth. The human past does not always divide neatly into separate creatures. Sometimes the mystery lies in populations that are both connected and different, close enough to mix, distant enough to preserve old forms. Then there are claims that move beyond caution. Popular stories sometimes imagine surviving Neanderthals in remote mountains, Denisovans remembered as giants, or small island humans preserved in folklore as proof that Homo floresiensis lived almost into recent history. Local legends and oral traditions can be culturally important, and they should not be mocked, but they are not the same as fossil, archaeological, or genetic evidence. A story about small forest people may be intriguing beside the discovery of small-bodied humans on Flores, yet it cannot prove direct survival. A tale of giants does not identify Denisovans. A mysterious footprint does not overturn the fossil record. Unsupported claims may be entertaining, but they can blur the harder, more remarkable truth that science is already revealing. There are also disputes over tools and dates. Sometimes a site appears to show humans in a region far earlier than expected. If the claim is correct, it may rewrite migration routes or reveal unknown populations. But old sites are difficult. Stones can fracture naturally. Bones can be marked by trampling, sediment pressure, carnivore teeth, or excavation damage, dating can be complicated by disturbed layers. Serious researchers must ask whether an object is truly a tool, whether a mark is truly cut by a human hand, and whether the age belongs to the human activity or to older material moved into place. Extraordinary dates require especially strong evidence because a mistake can distort the whole map. This caution does not make the story smaller, it makes it stronger. The hidden human species beside us are not protected by accepting every claim. They are revealed by separating durable evidence from wishful thinking. Neanderthals become more impressive when stripped of brute caricature. Denisovans become stranger when recognized through real DNA rather than legend. Homo floresiensis becomes more astonishing when understood as island evolution rather than fantasy. Homo luzonensis becomes more intriguing precisely because the fossils are fragmentary and difficult, not because certainty is forced where it does not yet belong. The disputed bones and strange claims remind us that prehistory lives on a narrow ridge between skepticism and imagination. Too much skepticism can flatten the past into a dull sequence of safe facts. Too much imagination can turn it into myth. The work is to hold both wonder and restraint. A tooth may be a doorway, a jaw may change a map, a genome may reveal a population no one knew existed. But each fragment must be allowed to say only what it can say. The ancient human world was crowded, surprising, and incomplete. Its mysteries are real not because every rumor is true, but because the evidence that survives is powerful enough, even in fragments, to show that humanity was once far wider than memory. Extinction sounds absolute when spoken aloud. It suggests a clean border between what is gone and what remains, as if a people can vanish without residue, leaving behind only bones in caves and names in scientific papers. But the deeper human story refuses that neat ending. Some of what disappeared did not disappear completely. It passed through us. It entered later populations not as memory or legend, but as inheritance. The hidden human species that once lived beside Homo sapiens are gone as separate worlds, yet pieces of them still travel quietly through living bodies, affecting immunity, adaptation, and in some cases the way modern humans respond to the environments around them. Disappearance, in this case, does not mean total absence. It means that independent human lineages ended while fragments of their biology survived. Neanderthal ancestry provides the clearest example because it is so widespread outside Africa. Most people with ancestry from Europe, Asia, or the Americas carry small amounts of Neanderthal-derived DNA, usually a modest percentage, but spread across many parts of the genome. These fragments are not the same in every person. One individual carries some pieces, another carries others, and together living populations preserve a larger mosaic of Neanderthal ancestry than any single body does. This is a subtle but important point. No one alive today is a Neanderthal in any meaningful biological sense, yet human populations collectively still contain scattered remnants of that vanished world. Like pages of a book distributed across millions of hands, some of those pages seem to matter. Variants associated with skin biology, hair, immune response, metabolism, fat storage, and inflammation have been linked in part to archaic ancestry, especially Neanderthal ancestry. The picture is complex and often probabilistic, not dramatic. A gene does not dictate destiny, and human traits almost always involve many interacting factors. Still, some inherited variants may have helped modern humans adjust to non-African climates, seasonal light patterns, pathogens, and local ecologies after leaving Africa. This would make evolutionary sense. Neanderthals had spent hundreds of thousands of years in parts of Eurasia, enduring cold, variable seasons, and unfamiliar disease environments long before modern humans arrived there in larger numbers. Yet legacy is not always beneficial. Some archaic variants may increase susceptibility to certain inflammatory conditions, autoimmune tendencies, or other health risks in the modern world. A trait that may once have been helpful, or at least harmless, under Ice Age conditions can become less useful in agricultural or urban societies with very different diets, pathogens, and life expectancies. The meaning of inheritance changes when the environment changes. What survives in the record suggests that ancient DNA is not a collection of gifts from the past. It is a complicated biological inheritance, carrying advantages in some settings, costs in others, and neutral fragments in many cases. Denisovan ancestry adds another layer because it is less familiar to the public, and yet, in some ways, more striking. In parts of Asia, and especially among populations in Oceania, Denisovan-related ancestry survives in meaningful amounts. One of the most famous cases involves populations on the Tibetan Plateau. A variant associated with adaptation to low oxygen, high-altitude environments appears to have been inherited from Denisovan-related people. In practical terms, this means that a human population known mostly from a fingerbone, teeth, and a few other traces may have contributed to the later success of people living high above sea level, where breathing itself becomes a challenge. It is one of the clearest examples of a vanished human leaving behind something directly tied to survival. There are other hints that archaic ancestry may shape immune responses or physiological traits in populations across Asia and Oceania, though such claims must be handled carefully. Scholars still debate the precise effects of many variants, and the evidence remains incomplete because genes rarely act alone. Still, the broad pattern is hard to ignore. Ancient human mixture did not merely leave a decorative trace in our ancestry. In some cases, it may have altered the biological toolkit with which later populations encountered cold, disease, sunlight, altitude, and other pressures. The hidden humans do not survive as neighbours anymore, but parts of their solutions to the world may survive in us. A lesser-known detail makes this legacy even more unsettling, because different modern populations inherited different archaic fragments. The overall human species still carries a distributed archive of extinct relatives. One population may preserve one set of Neanderthal-derived variants, another population a different set, and some groups Denisovan-related segments that others lack almost entirely. This means that the afterlife of these vanished humans is not evenly shared. Their remnants are scattered through the global species in unequal ways, depending on where ancient encounters happened and how later migrations unfolded. The human present is therefore not only the descendant of one lineage, it is a patchwork shaped by ancient meetings whose consequences remain unevenly written across the world. This creates an uncomfortable but valuable shift in identity. For a long time, human uniqueness is framed as separation. Homo sapiens is imagined as a pure and singular species that rose above every other form of humanity. The newer picture is different. Modern humans are singular in the sense that they are the only human species left alive, but not in the sense of being untouched. The species survives partly by interaction, movement, and incorporation. It carries traces of relatives once treated as entirely other. That does not erase the differences between those groups, nor does it collapse them into one undifferentiated humanity. It simply means that the line between us and them was not as final as once believed. There is also a deeper legacy that is harder to measure than genes. The discovery of these hidden relatives changes how humanity understands itself. Neanderthals are no longer cautionary caricatures of stupidity. Denisovans are no longer non-existent. Island humans such as Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis show that intelligence, adaptation, and survival could take forms once barely imagined. Africa's missing lineages suggest that the roots of our own species are more braided than a single origin myth allows. Even where no genetic inheritance is known, there is an intellectual inheritance. These discoveries teach modern humans to see their species not as the inevitable summit of a ladder, but as the last surviving branch of a once much larger tree. That shift matters because extinction can create arrogance. When only one human species remains, it becomes easy to imagine that its survival proves superiority in some complete moral sense. The older evidence resists that comfort. What still lives in us is not a badge of conquest. It is a reminder of contingency, contact, and shared ancestry. Some vanished humans contributed directly to our biology. Others may have shaped the environments, food webs, or encounter zones through which our ancestors moved. All of them now shape our understanding of what a human life could be. So the hidden species beside us have not entirely retreated into silence. They remain in proteins, immune pathways, altitude responses, fragments of skin biology, and the broader genetic archive of living populations. More than that, they remain as a correction to the story we tell about ourselves. The last human species carries ghosts within it, not metaphorically, but materially. Their worlds are gone. Their separate fires have gone out. Their languages, gestures, and local knowledge have disappeared beyond recovery. Yet they are not absent in the strict sense. Some part of them continues, faint and rearranged, inside the species that endured. By the time the last other humans fade from the record, the planet has not become empty. It has become lonelier in a very specific way. Forests still breathe over the tropics. Mammoths still cross cold plains for a while. Rivers still cut valleys through stone. Ice still brightens the north. Fires still burn in caves and open camps. Children are still born into danger and hunger and weather. But the old plurality of human forms is gone, or nearly gone. And Homo sapiens begins to stand alone in a role no species could have understood while living it. One kind of human remains to inherit a world once shared by several. This final survival is often described as triumph, but triumph is too simple a word for something so tangled. Homo sapiens does not survive because the species is untouched by chance, nor because every other human was weak, stupid, or destined to vanish. The evidence points toward a more uncomfortable conclusion. Modern humans survive through a combination of flexibility, social connection, mobility, symbolic behavior, population growth, adaptation, interbreeding, and accident. Some advantages may have mattered greatly in certain places and less in others. Wider networks may have allowed groups to exchange materials, partners, information, and help across larger distances. More flexible technologies may have helped in changing environments. Symbolic objects, ornaments, and shared identities may have strengthened bonds beyond the immediate family. Yet no single explanation fully accounts for why one human lineage endured while others disappeared. The last human standing is not necessarily the best in every environment. Neanderthals knew their cold territories with a depth modern humans entering Europe could not have possessed at first. Denisovan-related people may have carried adaptations to high mountains and Asian landscapes that later Homo sapiens inherited. Island humans survived in ecological worlds where body size, isolation, and local knowledge mattered more than the traits often celebrated in modern narratives. African populations carried deep diversity, with groups separating and reconnecting across immense spans of time. The survival of Homo sapiens does not erase the competence of the others. It only marks the outcome of pressures that accumulated over generations until only one human world remained visible. What makes Homo sapiens different may lie partly in the scale of connection. A small band can survive by knowing a valley. A larger network can survive by knowing several valleys through relatives, allies, and distant exchange. When climate shifts, when prey moves, when droughts deepen, when local groups fail, wider connection becomes a form of insurance. Objects found far from their sources suggest that some modern human communities maintained long-distance links. Ornaments and pigments may have helped signal belonging. Shared styles may have turned strangers into recognizable partners. Scholars still debate how early and how widely these social advantages appeared, but the possibility matters. Survival may not have belonged only to sharper tools, but to wider circles of trust. Language may have been part of this, though it is one of the hardest things to prove. Speech leaves no fossil. The bones of the throat and skull can offer hints, and genetics can offer clues, but no cave layer preserves a conversation. Neanderthals likely had vocal and cognitive capacities more sophisticated than old stereotypes allowed, and it is unsafe to draw a bright line between speaking humans and silent relatives. Still, Homo sapiens may have developed forms of communication and symbolic cooperation that helped larger groups coordinate, remember, teach, and imagine beyond the immediate present. The evidence remains incomplete. What survives in the record suggests growing complexity, but not the exact sound of any vanished voice. The irony is that the species left alone is also the species that carries the others inside it. The last human standing is not pure in the old imagined sense. It is braided with fragments of neighbours. Neanderthal ancestry travels in many populations beyond Africa. Denisovan-related ancestry persists in parts of Asia and Oceania. Possible ghost lineages linger as unresolved signals, even in Africa, where the oldest roots of modern humans lie. Population structure and possible archaic mixture complicate any simple origin story. Homo sapiens becomes the only surviving human species, but not by remaining sealed away from other humans. The species survives through contact as well as replacement. This changes the meaning of loneliness. Modern humanity is alone now in the sense that there are no Neanderthal communities in winter caves, no known Denisovan camps in mountain corridors, no small-bodied island humans moving through Flores, no Luzon people leaving curved toe bones in limestone darkness. But modern humanity is not alone in origin. It is crowded with inheritance. The vanished are no longer beside us as separate people, but their traces remain behind our eyes, in our cells, in our scientific maps, and in the humility forced by each new discovery. The mirror does not show them clearly, but it does not exclude them entirely. The last human standing also inherits responsibility for memory. No Neanderthal can tell the story of Neanderthals. No Denisovan can explain what Denisovan life felt like. No one from Flores or Luzon can describe the forest paths, the storms, the animals, the fear, the skills, the ordinary mornings that made up their worlds. The task falls to a later species that did not know them and nearly forgot they existed. That memory must be built from fragments and guarded against arrogance. It must admit uncertainty. It must avoid turning the vanished into monsters, failures, or romantic symbols. They were not lessons made for us. They were living populations with their own long present, and their disappearance only later became part of our story. When the final Neanderthal fires go cold, when Denisovan-related groups dissolve into absence and ancestry, when island lineages leave their last tools beneath sediment, nothing in the universe announces that a chapter has ended. There is no monument. There is only continuation. Homo sapiens keeps moving, crossing rivers, coasts, ice, deserts, and seas. The species paints, buries, hunts, remembers, invents, destroys, cares, migrates, and eventually builds worlds so large they seem to stand outside nature, though they never do. Beneath all of that motion remains the older truth humanity was once plural. The present is the narrow end of a wide and vanished past. And so the story slows, not because the mystery is solved, but because the remaining light is softer now. The hidden human species that may have lived beside us do not return as complete figures. They return as fragments lifted from cave floors, as teeth measured under glass, as bones whose shapes disturb old assumptions, as genetic traces moving silently through people who never knew their names. They return in the cold of a Siberian cave, in the limestone shadows of Luzon, in the volcanic island world of Flores, in the valleys where Neanderthals once watched the movement of animals through winter air. Time has taken nearly everything from them. It has taken their voices, their gestures, their shelters, their remembered dead, their names for rivers, their ways of warning children, their knowledge of edible roots, safe paths, dangerous cliffs, and changing weather. What remains is small, but small things can be enough to reopen an entire world. A finger bone can reveal a people, a tooth can widen a continent. A trace of DNA can show that an encounter once happened in the deep dark before memory. The final image is not of one species conquering an empty planet. It is of many human fires burning separately across the Pleistocene night, some in caves, some near rivers, some under forests, some on islands beyond deep water, one by one. Most of those fires dim. Some are extinguished completely. Some leave sparks that pass into another flame. At last, only one fire remains visible, and for a long time it mistakes its loneliness for proof that it was always alone. But the ground remembers otherwise. The genome remembers otherwise. The old stones remember otherwise. Beneath the modern world, beneath cities, fields, roads, and names, there is a deeper human silence filled with vanished neighbours. They lived, adapted, suffered, endured, met us, mixed with us, and disappeared before history could begin. And when the wind moves over a cave mouth or across a drowned coast, it carries no voices back. It only leaves the feeling that the human story is wider than memory, older than certainty, and still unfinished in the dark.